Good afternoon, Virgo. Someone's not just casually interested in you, they're actually losing their mind over you, aren't they? And the wild part is, it's not even about the obvious things you'd expect, not your looks or your status or the persona you carefully present to the world, but two incredibly specific behaviors you probably don't even realize you're doing, two small gestures or habits or ways of being that have completely hijacked their ability to think about anyone else the way they think about you. Let me decode what's registering in the obsession patterns circling your existence right now. The absolute first thing punching through is your growing awareness that someone's fixation on you has crossed from normal attraction territory into something consuming. You're likely detecting their energy everywhere, not in creepy stalker way, but in that unmistakable frequency of someone who can't stop mentally returning to you, who's replaying your interactions, analyzing your words for hidden meanings, manufacturing reasons to be in your vicinity. You might be noticing they remember details you barely mentioned, that they've tailored themselves to appeal to preferences you casually revealed. And that level of attention feels simultaneously flattering and slightly overwhelming because you're not used to being the subject of someone's entire internal world. Here's the raw truth about what you're actually observing. Their obsession isn't generic. You're probably experiencing someone who gets weirdly specific when they talk about you, is less than #0, 5 hashes greater than not just you're amazing, but elaborating on exact moments, precise things you said or did that apparently detonated something in their chest. You might be tracking them, circling back repeatedly to same two things, mentioning them in different contexts, like they're trying to decode why these particular elements of you have such disproportionate power over their nervous system, and their inability to articulate why it matters so much is actually evidence that it's hitting them at instinctual level beneath language. What's detonating in their neural pathways is one completely unconscious thing you do that reads as intimacy to them. You're probably executing some small gesture that you've never thought twice about, maybe the specific way you listen when they're talking, giving them 100% attention in culture where everyone's perpetually half present. Or maybe it's how you touch them casually, hand on their arm for emphasis in conversation, contact that feels natural to you but is electric to them because you're not touch avoidant the way everyone else in their orbit is. You might be doing something your own personality style makes automatic, something that costs you nothing but lands on them, like proof they matter, like evidence you're creating space for them specifically rather than treating them as interchangeable with anyone else. This reflection demands you examine what you do naturally in relationships that you've maybe been told is too much, and whether those exact behaviors that past people criticized as excessive or weird are precisely what this person is interpreting as them being chosen, being seen, being valued in ways they're starving for. You're probably noticing them trying to create situations where you'll repeat whatever the first thing is. You might be observing them engineering scenarios that prompt that specific behavior. asking questions they already know answers to because they want you to explain things in that particular way you explain things, or creating problems they don't actually need solved because they're addicted to watching you problem solve. You could be tracking their transparent manipulation and finding it endearing rather than annoying because their desperation to experience you doing that one thing, again, is such obvious evidence of impact you're having on them, whether you intended that impact or not. What's also wrecking their composure is second thing that's probably related to your values showing up in action. You're likely doing something that demonstrates integrity or loyalty or competence in specific domain they care about. Maybe you kept promise when everyone else in their life makes and breaks commitments casually. Or maybe you handled a difficult situation with grace they didn't expect. Or maybe you showed up for someone they love in a way that proved you're not just performing goodness for them, but actually operate from principles. You might be demonstrating consistency between your stated values and actual behavior. And for someone who's experienced endless gap between what people claim and how they act, watching you actually be who you say you are is intoxicating because it suggests you're safe, you're real. You're not going to reveal yourself as fraud once they're invested. What's particularly unhinged about what I'm tracking is they've probably told other people about these two things. You might be completely unaware that you're being discussed, that someone's boring their friends with detailed analysis of why the way you did that one specific thing reveals your character, your compatibility with them, your potential as partner. You could be the subject of conversations where they're trying to explain to skeptical audience why these two ordinary seeming behaviors have convinced them you're different. And their inability to make anyone else understand why it matters is isolating them further into obsession. Because if no one else gets it, that must mean this connection is special, is unique, is worth the mental real estate you're occupying. Um, you're probably detecting that these two things aren't what you'd lead with if asked about your best qualities. You might be tracking that whatever's captured their fixation isn't stuff you advertise on dating profiles or highlight in job interviews, not your achievements or your clever banter, but some weirdly mundane aspect of how you move through a world that you don't think about because it's just who you are. You could be discovering that trying to be impressive is wasted effort, that what actually hooks people at depth is the unperformed, authentic you leaking through in moments when you're not managing your image. And this person is obsessed specifically because they've glimpsed real you rather than curated you. What's threading through their fantasy architecture is they're building an entire relationship future around these two data points. You're probably being idealized based on insufficient evidence they've taken two genuine things about you and extrapolated entire personality. Deciding that because you do these specific things, you must also be insert 17 other qualities. They're projecting. You might be aware you're being pedestaled in a way that's not entirely accurate, that they're filling gaps in their knowledge of you with their wishful thinking. and navigating being seen as better than you are is delicate because you don't want to shatter their illusion cruelly, but you also can't maintain performance of being their fantasy forever. This reflection demands you examine whether you're comfortable being loved for who you actually are, including your flaws, or whether you're tempted to keep performing the version of you they're obsessed with because their intensity is addictive, even though maintaining facade is exhausting and ultimately doomed. You're probably noticing they've started mirroring one or both of the things back to you. You might be observing them adopting similar behavior patterns, doing for you the thing you did for them, trying to speak your love language now that they've identified it. You could be experiencing their attempts at reciprocation as slightly awkward because it's not natural to them yet, it's studied. But their effort to learn how to love you the way you unconsciously showed them how you love is actually touching, even if execution is imperfect. What's also combusting is one of these two things probably violates some social norm they're used to. You're likely doing something that's slightly countercultural. Maybe you're direct in an environment that prizes polite vagueness, or maybe you're vulnerable in context that rewards emotional guardedness. Or maybe you prioritize kindness in space that values competitive edge. You might be breaking unspoken rules in ways that initially confused them, but now read as refreshing contrast to everyone else's conformity. And their obsession is partly relief at finding someone who doesn't follow the same restrictive script everyone else is performing. The addiction patterns suggest you're experiencing someone who's trying to lock you down. You might be noticing increased possessiveness, not necessarily in toxic, controlling way, but in underlying anxiety that if they don't secure commitment, you'll eventually do these two magical things for someone else and they'll lose exclusive access to experience that's currently theirs. You could be picking up on their urgency about defining relationship, about establishing exclusivity. And understanding their panic comes from believing what you offer is rare rather than common, helps you hold their intensity with more compassion, even if you're not ready to match their pace. What's significant is your approaching decision about whether to keep doing these two things naturally. You might be becoming self conscious now that you're aware someone's fixated on specific behaviors, wondering if you should amplify them to keep them hooked or suppress them to test if their interest survives without the triggers. You could be experiencing temptation to weaponize your power by withholding the exact things, affect them is less than has hone. Zero hash is greater than. And recognizing that impulse as both natural response to feeling vulnerable under someone's scrutiny and also potentially cruel manipulation of a person whose only crime is being transparent about what moves them. This reflection demands you examine whether you're someone who uses people's revealed vulnerabilities against them, or whether you can be trusted with information about what matters to someone without immediately calculating how to leverage that information for your advantage. Um, you're probably grappling with whether their obsession is healthy. You might be vacillating between enjoying being worshipped and worrying that anyone this fixated on you is unstable. Wondering if intensity that feels romantic now will reveal itself as possessive later. You could be trying to assess whether you're dealing with someone who's genuinely captivated or someone who's projecting unmet needs onto convenient target. And making that distinction without enough data is impossible, which means you're going to have to take risk of engaging or miss potential connection because you were too cautious. What I'm witnessing in the attachment formations is these two things work synergistically. You're probably doing one thing that makes them feel safe and another that makes them feel seen, or one that demonstrates your competence and another that reveals your softness. You might be embodying paradox they didn't know they needed: strong and gentle, independent and attentive, challenging and accepting. And that complexity is what's driving obsession, because you're not flatly one thing they can categorize and dismiss. You're multidimensional in specific ways that keep them discovering new layers. The neural hijacking suggests you're dealing with someone who's trying to engineer more exposure to you. You're probably experiencing increased contact attempts, invitations to events, suggestions to collaborate on projects, manufactured reasons why you should spend time together. You might be watching them create opportunities to be around you while trying to appear casual about it. And their transparent maneuvering is either charming or irritating, depending on whether you reciprocate their interest or whether you're trying to maintain platonic boundaries. They keep testing. What's also erupting is they've probably started associating random things with you. You're likely showing up in their awareness constantly because everything reminds them of the two things they hear. Someone laugh and think about how you laugh when you do the first thing. They see object you mentioned once and it triggers memory of you doing the second thing. And that level of mental colonization you've achieved in their consciousness is both flattering evidence of your impact and slightly concerning indicator that they might need to develop life outside of thinking about you. You could be aware you're becoming their whole personality and unsure whether to feel responsible for moderating their intensity or whether to just let them have their obsession as long as it's not harmful. This reflection demands you examine what responsibility you have for someone else's emotional management, and where line is between being compassionate about a impact you have on people versus trying to control others' perfectly valid feelings because those feelings create pressure or expectation you're not ready to meet. So, as you navigate being the object of someone's consuming fixation over two tiny specific aspects of who you are, decide what you want to do with that power. You're probably feeling combination of this is amazing and this is terrifying, enjoying being wanted this much, while also recognizing that anyone this obsessed has capacity to be devastated if you don't reciprocate at matching intensity. What matters is being honest, not leading them on if you know you're not interested, not using their obvious vulnerability for ego boost or to keep them as backup option. Trust that these two things aren't tricks you're performing, they're genuine aspects of who you are. You're probably tempted to either suppress them to test if interest survives or exaggerate them to maximize their effect. But what if you just kept being you at natural frequency and let that be enough data for them to decide if they can handle real you versus idealized you? The two specific things they're obsessed with are real, which is good foundation, but real relationship requires them falling for 70 other things about you too, including less impressive parts. And you both need to find out if what they're feeling can expand beyond initial obsession into actual sustainable love. They're madly in love with you because of two specific things you do. That's beautiful. That's also an incomplete picture of who you are. And your job isn't to maintain performance of only those two things, but to gradually reveal fuller self and discover if their mad love can evolve into sane love that sees all of you and stays anyway. Let them be obsessed. Let them be unhinged about you. And also maintain enough boundary and self awareness that you don't lose yourself trying to be their fantasy. You're more than two things. Eventually, they need to fall for the whole package. See if you even want them to. But whatever you decide, keep doing those two things naturally because they're yours. Not performance for their benefit, but authentic expression of who you are. Anyone worth having will love you for real reasons. These two things might be the entry point. Make sure there's enough substance behind the door to justify the obsession they're bringing to your threshold.